Good evening, friends, to this unique kind of a meeting and a discussion for the Yokohama Triennale, which is happening at the moment in Japan during these pandemic times, which are, of course, very unusual times. I welcome you all to this evening's discussion, and I hope that all of us do justify our time and your time during this discussion. Let me first introduce you to this Triennale. Yokohama Triennale started in 2001. It's its seventh edition now. And ever since its beginning, the organizers of this Triennale have always had Japanese curators or Japanese artistic directors for this, what you call Triennale. The first time they invited uh, artistic directors, or we call them curators from outside Japan. That happens to be Raqs Media Collective. And Raqs Media Collective is, as we all know, based in Delhi. So these triennales, as we know, it's a very unique kind of an opportunity that during these times, this is the first world art event, a major world art event, which has opened during these tough times. As we know, this was supposed to open at the time of, almost the time of coinciding with the Olympics. Olympics unfortunately could not happen, but this Triennale has happened. And I really congratulate to the organizers of the Yokohama Triennale, as well as its curators and other colleagues of theirs who have made it possible and shown the world that during this time when we are all dismayed, all disappointed, we do not know what our future is going to be. And there is still hope that artists can show the world the way ahead. So now I'll introduce you to the Raqs Media Collective, the artistic directors of this Triennale. The Raqs Media Collective, they founded this foundation or collective in 1992. Three young artists came out of Jamia Millia Islamia, Delhi, and then they worked in Sarai for about 10 years. And their practice is creating art, doing performance art, writing, curating shows and exhibitions, and also done a couple of other biennales before that. And most of their artistic practice is philosophically oriented and loaded with history. So these artists, or this collective, is unique in a way in its practice. So we expected something unique from them during this Triennale, because Triennales are meant to provide a platform for new ideas, new concept to be discussed, to be, to ask difficult questions, which ultimately end up, shaping culture, societies. This is what this Triennale is also, I think, expected to do. And now we come to the name of the Triennale, Afterglow. And I think it will be better that the Triennale curators, the artistic directors, discuss it in detail. But I'll basically talk about some things which are very primary, in the sense that when we talk about Afterglow, the idea which comes to our mind is the screen of our televisions, analog televisions, or the cosmic rays left behind by the Big Bang. Well, those are the kind of ideas which come to our mind. But during this Triennale, when they set upon this procedure or process of inviting artists or public, they shared with public as well as the invited artists a source book which the Raqs Media had prepared in advance. So they were inviting a lot of people to respond to that source book. And during this Triennale, they talk also about toxicity, about migration of concerns, about journey through space and time, history in the context of present and imagined futures, about illumination as danger as well as attraction, an enigma linking contamination and tenderness, magnetism, mystery, futuristic, comforting, and scary. So I'll read a couple of paragraphs which Raqs Media has prepared, so that you get a bit of an idea how their mind works. They say the afterglow is also an infrastructure of relationships, of precepts and effects, of an ability to see and narrate the world with patience and wonderment. Afterglow invites you to be in proximity to the radiant, fluctuating glow of probes and premonitions, blending anticipation and projection with the calmness of rumination and the pugnacity of assertion. It invites you to lose your inhibitions and find a vivid joy that can come with meeting the unfamiliar. Here, art plays whimsical and yet disorienting sport. It intimates a playful ease with growing recognition of non-humans. It recalls histories of collective will and individual obstinacy. It observes variations of known forces, and it draws us closer to confront the fear of toxic. So I'm reading out in between. These are not in continuity. And the last paragraph which I'm going to read about is this edition, Yokohama Triennale 2020, is deliberately hospitable to diverse currents of our diverse world. From its very first moment, it will cajole people to see the world as made of liquid states, dissolving and blurring our hold on fixed certainties, making edges dance as centers where wilderness is not opposed to civilization and where there is a defiance to the assumed insularity of cultural ethics. But this Triennale also talks about indigenous ecosystems. But before that, I'll introduce you to our participant artists, in which we have Asako Iwama from Japan, who practices in Germany. Then we have Ivana Frank. Ivana, please correct me if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I am not really sure about it. Is Franke or Ivana Frank. So she's from Croatia and works in Germany. Lantian Z is from China, works in Dubai. Amol Patil is from India. Kabelo Malatsie from South Africa, Johannesburg. And Renuka Rajiv from India. Masaru Iwai, Japan, but works in London, UK. Naim Mohamed, he is from Bangladesh, but works in USA. And Yoi Kawakubo, Japan. Then I would request the artists to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to give their presentation. So here, now I'll invite Raqs Media to kind of give us a feeling or idea when they set upon this Triennale. What were their concerns? What did they really want to bring on table? How Japan becomes a different kind of a land, and Yokohama being a port city, as they have told us, written material that there was some woman of Bangladeshi origin who kind of did her travelogues about the Yokohama port city in the 20th century. So there are many things, and especially I would request them to also deliberate upon the changed circumstances because of the pandemic. How kind of did they have to change their strategy? Did they kind of continue with what their idea originally was, and how the artists responded to the changed circumstances, all that. And now I invite Shuddhabrata, Sengupta, Jeebesh, Bagchi, and Monica Narula to kindly give us an idea about the curatorial practice and the artistic director's note and their idea. Shuddha, Jeebesh, and Monica.
Thank you, Diwan. It's a real pleasure to be with everybody here, and I think that the Punjab Lalit Kala Akademi is doing a fantastic job by bringing, in a sense, the world to viewers and listeners in Chandigarh, in Delhi, all over India, and of course all over the world. When you were reading out that list of names of all our friends and colleagues, I got a sense that it's a kind of a picture of the world, a turning world. And every Triennale or Biennale is a picture, is a map, is a picture of the world in motion. So is the Yokohama Triennale. And it's an opportunity for us all as artists, as curators, to reflect on this state of being worldly. It's a very difficult, but at the same time, a very simple proposition. How do you relate to the entire population? Every Triennale, we think, is given this task at a conscious or at an unconscious level. It's producing a sense of what it means to be in this time, which, as you said, right now is a very special time, a time of quarantine and isolation and anxiety, but also of hope and the idea of overcoming. But it's also a kind of way of thinking about space and a mobile space. We forget that the Earth is a turning planet. And in our practice in Raqs, we've always been very mindful of the idea of the turn or the revolution or the whirl of our consciousness. So how do we speak to all these artists who are all turning in their different places together, the world, the city of Yokohama? Think of these as very many different kinds of movements that are happening at the same time. And our task as curators is to kind of be with all these movements, to be present to them, to be listening to them, and to be talking to them, and to have ourselves receive the sense of this agility, this energy, and this moment in time in this space. I think we will have lots to talk about. So I'm going to pass the baton on to my colleague, Monica, who needs to unmute her screen. And then she will pass the baton on to Jeebesh. And then we will pass the baton back to you and to the artists. Monica.
Thanks, Shuddha. Thank you, Divan, for this evening. And thank you all the colleagues who joined us for this session today. You know, the introduction you laid out, Divan, is actually, I was kind of like, it covers so many facets and so many aspects, which I assume holds true for any kind of creative encounter and creative endeavor. So I'm just going to cherry pick a couple of things that we've been thinking through, and we can come back to more ideas later. So a couple of considerations which have no obvious connection. So obviously from the title Afterglow, it's there's a feeling of light. And thinking on light was actually an important one of the starting considerations for us, because light, you know, of course, is a very strong metaphor. It is used in multiple, it's important in Semitic traditions, for example, but not only. I mean, but light is also an infrastructural kind of, we can look at it as a kind of an infrastructural capacity, because what it illuminates is one way of looking at things, or as we are talking about in our source book, what it glows with, how it creates luminosity is another way of looking at a relationship with light. And so we were really interested in that way of looking at light, because not only what it lights up, but why it glows, whether it's got to do with biological marine life that does that, or the luminosity of friendship, which Ivana Boehm speaks very beautifully in her essay, from which we have taken fragments from in the source book. It creates a different way of being and a different way of looking at where we are in the world and what we seek from it and what we offer to it. And I think this play of what we get and what we give, especially what we give, is what we were interested in thinking through with the idea of light. Afterglow implies an event of which could be extraordinarily beautiful, could be physical, could be sensorial, could also be extremely traumatic. But it allows for us to make those sort of connections in our own mind. It allows us to travel and think about all of these possibilities at the same time. So one of the reasons for thinking Afterglow is to think light as infrastructure. Another consideration I think that's quite important, and which will emerge later in the evening when Lantian and Kabelo talk about it, is thinking on the idea of discursive justice. It's an important sort of axis or tributary in how one understands what discursive justice can be, and what kind of place it holds, from where can one make a claim for it. Does it exist only in speech, or can there be other forms of staking a claim of how one narrates the world in a more equal manner? So we invited Kabelo and Lantian and Michelle from Hong Kong and from Dubai and from Johannesburg to join us and to lead on into sort of thinking this axis. So there's actually an exhibition that's ongoing at the moment in Johannesburg, sort of activating sort of propositions around it. A third thing I think, which I could talk a little bit on, is the idea of toxicity. You know, it's funny because, you know, it now, of course, being the time that it is, and how you know, you are asking us, we're asking ourselves, what is the relationship between the exhibition in a certain way and this sort of unliving organism and the impact it has on our lives. But what is interesting is, of course, that we had actually already constructed the exhibition and invited and commissioned, and, you know, all of the kind of dialogues have more or less reached a point of kind of fruition by the time the pandemic began to take on the form that it's taken on. But what is important, I think, for us has been the fact that toxicity is something we were already thinking with, and has been an important cornerstone of how we've been thinking the entire. Actually, there's an essay we wrote a couple of years ago, which we wrote for Live Mint as a kind of Independence Day special, where we argued for the fact that one cannot live without toxicity in the present world. I mean, it can take on many forms, from the climactic kind of aftermath of events that we see around us, to pollution, to all sorts of things. But the point is not just that it's environmental or climactic, but the fact that it's also civilizational. And how does one then acknowledge the fact that we have turned our back to it, how we live with the idea of the toxic, by segregating those whom we consider to be toxic? That was one of the important axes from the very beginning on thinking the toxic. It has metastasized, I would say, into another kind of form. But I will now ask Jeebesh to, as Shuddha said, carry on with the baton, and we can come back to some of these questions later.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Shuddha. Thank you, Diwan, for staging this. You know, this screen, I've got so used to this multiple screen and the time zone, the morning coffee of Naim to Masaru, though he is disguising it, but Masaru's post-dinner whiskey. So we have this huge bandwidth, but which is a kind of a daily life for us for the last 4 months, have been moving to a little salad in Berlin and a khichdi in Delhi. So this combination of moving between time zone, between people, I think this is what Triennale does. You know, like in some way, it is a product. It produces a gathering of various different itineraries, intellectual biographies, tendencies together, and an ability to make sense and connect, not cohere, but connect, and build some tenuous, fragile connections and let it be. So that is one. But today I will just start, I've already started. Just want to pay a tribute to a very formidable philosopher who just died yesterday, Bernard Stiegler, because Monica was talking about toxicity and care 3 years back in Hangzhou, in the invite of Gao Ximing and Lui Tiang. Two of our Lui Tiang worked with us in Shanghai Biennale, and he wanted to carry on the conversation. There was a gathering that was produced in Hangzhou with Santosh, Sadanand Santosh, Prasad Shetty, Rakhi Balaram, and us, and Lui Tian, and there was Shweta also. So the idea was that we had this long discussion. Gao made a discussion with us and all of us, and Bernard Stiegler, who was there in Hangzhou with Yuki, one of his very bright student who was working on technology and the history of technology in China. And what was fascinating is that we touched upon this kind of almost like a difficult terrain of what does care constitute when you have to engage with toxicity, which goes excess of the pharmacon logic, because Stiegler was very much based within the logic of the pharmacon. And in the toxic, it pushes away from the pharmacon logic. And this is something that all of us were grappling then. And this is something that slowly with this last few years and with this Triennale, we are learning so much from each and every of the way artists bring it. So this idea of this gathering is also the intensity that makes and builds up a Triennale. It has one-to-one interaction, one-to-one ignitions. All of the people in this gathering, in this present gathering, has had one-to-one interaction with us, but also those one-to-one interactions producing a chain of other interactions. Like the first interaction, probably the first artist we met for this Triennale was Asako in this room. And we met her in Yokohama itself, where she showed her personal archive of the diaries of her father. And that gave rise to so many questions about perimeter of the self, perimeter of the examination, what is the port, what does the port do to our imagination, how it increases the perimeter of how to imagine a place. So this kind of question starts evolving. So so to us, the gathering, a Triennale gathering, is that each point becomes a ripple to weave in other and ask question as to who else could start working with us in this thinking through this kind of overlapping worlds, perimeters, and overlapping subjectivities. So today I won't say anything else, but we'll just say that see this as a continuing gathering. The Triennale is also happening in this moment, because now the colleagues who set up in Yokohama set up the Triennale did it like this, and they are also probably watching this now as a continuing part of that mode of actually working, thinking, and still unraveling what is at play. So this is the ground by which we have worked, and this is the ground by which we think its reception and its growth will be.
So, Jeebesh, you done?
I think so.
Okay.
I went out of steam.
Yeah. Okay. So before we come to the artists, may I request Shuddha to, because we have been talking, discussing. These are spoken words, but the viewers, because of this pandemic, nobody has actually seen from this part of the world, at least, how the Triennale looks like. Because ultimately, it is the creativity, the creative works, the visuals, which are going to kind of make some kind of an impact upon the viewer. So can we see some of the visuals of the artworks which have been created there?
Sure. I'm going to just pull up a little slideshow of some of the works. This is a selection of some of the works. What you see on the screen right now is actually the facade of the museum, which is completely transformed as you go in. This is a work by Ivana Franke, which one of our concerns was that we would be playing with awareness itself, and even an awareness of awareness. So a landmark that is very familiar for people of Yokohama becomes completely transformed, becomes a soft, porous entry into the exhibition, and invites you in almost a kind of magical transformation. I will not talk about every artwork, because I think that you just need to see them, and you will need to hear from the artists themselves. But this is, as you walk in, the building itself is in many layers, and this is the central atrium. On two sides, there are these steps. This is what you see when you come in. You are greeted by a kind of central assemblage of these spinners, an artist called Nick Cave. And it immediately immerses you in this experience. There are other works that play with the cityscape itself and the relationship of the buildings to its surroundings. The museum and these sites are built on reclaimed land. So there's a kind of sense of the porosity of the land and the harbor and the sea that is gestured to. There are architectural interventions, works that play with living form as well as built interventions. I'm sure that Jeebesh and Monica would also like to come in on some of these works that you're seeing. Works that also make it possible for you to experience a different kind of bodily sensation. And I'd like to make this very clear. This exhibition opened at the time of the COVID pandemic. So attention to how people were going to be in the exhibition, how many of them were there to be at the same time, how was seating to be done, what were the kind of protocols of distance that would be followed. Every ticket was also a time slot. You went in for a certain time so that you're not crowding the exhibition, you're not in too close proximity, but at a certain kind of comfortable distance, both to the work, to the other works, and to other visitors. You can get a sense of how the interactions are between the works and people. These are people in a cinema in very separate individuated seats looking at Naim Mohamed's film. This is a still from that film. Long corridors. And you can get a sense of the fact that it's from what we hear from our colleagues in the Yokohama Museum, that there is a steady movement of people in the show, but they're not crowded in a sense, to make sure that they're not crowding. And there are lots of interesting events and other processes that are going on, and so on. Okay, so that gives you a sense, I hope, of some of the visual experience and the sensory experience of being in the show. I think it's good now to
invite the artists, right?
Yeah.
So Shuddha, but keep these visuals ready, because ultimately we are all visual artists. I would like to end the discussion with the visuals, not with the spoken words only. So kindly repeat them at the end of the discussion again. And before I invite the first artist, I would also like to speak to the viewers, participants who are watching us live on the PLKA live stream, that they can chat, they can ask questions on YouTube at the end of the discussion. Towards the end of the discussion, we would like to take a few questions and request the artists and Raqs Media to answer those questions. So now I'll invite the first artist in this discussion tonight is Lantian Z. As we all know, he is of Chinese origin, but works from Dubai. And at the same time, he is a part of a Discursive Justice Ensemble, which is also kind of having other members, like another artist who is participating in this discussion this evening, Kabelo, Malatsie. And they have been creating some kind of, how do you pronounce this? Is episodos or it's episodos? Episodes, how do you pronounce it?
Episodo.
Episodos. So they have created an episodo in Johannesburg, and in which they have taken an old home in which they have created artworks. He'll talk about that in detail. But before I really invite him, there is a little bit of more information about it, because this is not the only episode. There are many episodes happening, because Raqs Media kind of imagined of this Triennale traveling to other cities like Hong Kong and Johannesburg. And then there is another episode which I'll come to later, which is had to do something with perfumes, with the fashion industry. That I'll leave for later. Now I invite Lantian Z to talk about his experiences of this episode and his artistic practice. And if he can also share how he responded to when he was asked by Raqs Media to be part of this Triennale.
Great, thanks, Ivan. Also, let me know if I start to filibuster and you need to keep time. So to start with, I mean, Raqs has already pointed to this 1,000 days between editions of the Triennale. And so we know that the Triennale draws a wider paradigm than the exhibition, and that the thinking around the Triennale doesn't go only to a building, right? So one thing that this ensemble that you spoke about, that Kabelo, who is with us in the Zoom, as well as Michelle, who I believe is watching, and I have formed, one kind of move is to surf this meta that this paradigm invites. So in addition to that, what's interesting is that capacity also doesn't consolidate within this paradigm. So perhaps later, if there's time, I will also speak about producing work as an artist within the exhibitionary. But I'd like to start with the work with the ensemble that you've already pointed to, which occurs within these episodo moves, which have been designed to disaggregate this idea of the thematic, right? So Raqs have also spoken about this idea of the shoreline sensibility, and this is some of what the Discursive Justice Ensemble is formulating, some kind of shoreline sensibility between the curatorial and the artistic, a kind of chimeric appearance that produces certain tactics. And we formulate it as a kind of transcontinental tributary, which is inaugurated by the triennial, the triennial paradigmatic to investigate and perform aporias arising from claims to equality. And these happen through shifting forms of assembly. They happen with a vast cohort of protagonists. It happens through speech, through costume, through instrument. And generally, I think, and Kabelo will speak further to this afterward, but generally for me, what's interesting is the production of a kind of attitudinal tension field that is not logic on consensus between the three of us, but is instead syncopating, Shuddha said turning, this idea of the spin and the turn earlier. So that it's syncopating turns, tilts, leans in a way that does not know its place. And it's sort of something like playing a band at high bandwidth, taking a kind of abundance logic. And so a great deal of the deliberation between us has been about the shape of thinking and drawing this kind of tension field that can invite multiple charges that themselves also do not consolidate. Drawing a kind of miscegenated multitude in which speech is human and non-human, thermodynamic, weather pattern, phenomenological, and so on. So you can picture also a trajectory from the outside with a kind of subterranean ongoing deliberation that takes tactical eruptions that mark and weigh some of these assertions, in which law is taken as one dialect in a vast terrain that specifically is moded to acting as a kind of sanitation regime. And so we want to deliberate in a way that recognizes this, but also, let's say, disavows this kind of making, showing distinction that Raqs has spoken about. And also, more recently, a lot of thought has been going into this kind of loss, so-called loss of the spatial, and to not start with this premise of to not start with spatial as a premise for assembly, and to not start with apology, and to not start with some kind of recuperation logic, but instead to think about formulating and reformulating procedural forms attendant to the Biennale, like the press conference, the after party, the symposia, and to how to apply pressure onto these procedural forms, how to parse through the exhibition, parse through the online. It was mentioned.
You have already taken your 5 minutes. Maybe you can finish in 1 more minute, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for keeping me in check. I think I'll end with a picture which you can take to render some of what I'm saying, which is a boomerang's throw, which draws a kind of oblong trajectory, which this paradigm, this triennial paradigm inaugurates. It gains torque as it goes, it swings back, not to return to some origin, but to graze past the exhibitionary, grazing in a way that scratches, but also tickles. I'll just stop there.
Maybe if you can show 2, 3 images, that'll be nice.
I have no images to show you now, but perhaps the images that I have painted with my words will suffice.
I'm sorry I have to intervene because we have 8 more artists to share their experiences and their works. So I have to play this role of the spoil sport kind of a character. So please forgive me for that. Are you done?
Yes, please continue.
Okay, so I now move on to our next artist, which is Ivana Frank. And Ivana's work, which I think Shuddha or Jeebesh, one of them, did talk about it, which is transforming the Yokohama Museum into a dissolving liquid state. And that itself is a kind of a statement, because the Yokohama Museum is not a small place, and it requires a special kind of technical expertise. And during these pandemic times, it is even more difficult when they are managing it from online kind of a thing. And I had a glimpse of that in the walkthrough which they showed. It really looks as if it's melting, as if it's moving, like a waterfall or something, when you look through a lens when things are not very clear. So she'll talk about it. Ivana, off to you.
Hello. I would like to thank you, Divan, for this invitation, and of course to Raqs for invitation to Yokohama Triennale. And this is actually, as Jeebesh was mentioning, a part of it, but where I would actually like to reflect a little bit backwards in a way to actually introduce two ideas, where one would be deep time of making the work or of the conversation, and another one would be disappearance. And this is actually in conversation with the Raqs. These two ideas are coming in. So in parallel with this, I would like to show one animation, which I would like to ask you to see it full screen. And I will start it now. Okay, is it working? No, just a second. It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I've known the Raqs for 13 years now, and we have been, we're in conversation and working together on several projects, or actually 4 or 5, so quite many. And I was thinking like what this relationship is actually about. So in a sense, I can't say that it's actually relation of artists and curators, or even only friendship, but it actually, I would say it became somewhat part of my practice. So in a sense, how practice of Raqs is a conversation between them, and then also conversation with the artists. So I think actually my practice somehow incorporated this conversation with them. So, and what I'm doing, I'm a visual artist, and my work centers mostly around perception and about modes of challenging perception, or challenging the habitual ways that we actually see, and the relation of seeing and making sense. So how things actually appear to us is somehow a central inquiry. So of course, how things disappear and what does it mean for things to disappear is also like central. So when Monica actually asked me about 1.5 years ago, can you make building disappear? I actually thought that this is the luckiest day of the year, because it's not so often that one gets so exciting questions which point to like core of one's interest. And this was some sort of junction of the beginning of work on this project. So of course, first I thought it just like thought experiments. What does it mean actually to make the building disappear? And except that one would say that the appearance is not there anymore. It's also a question of our knowledge about the appearance being dissolved somehow. But when one starts thinking about it practically, like what does it mean to actually make something disappear? First, everybody would think, I guess, about like Harry Potter and the Cloak of Invisibility. And so the easiest point would be to find it on eBay and buy it. And it should be actually within Yokohama budget, and it's done. But then, except that this is not exactly feasible technologically, it's also a question, what does this mean actually conceptually? That did building actually disappear? And certainly it actually does not. So it's absence, because everybody knows that the building is there and everybody is coming to see the exhibition. So actually the building would affect them. And if it's not there, its absence actually would be very, very loud. So the building would become apparent in this absence. So, so we would actually see the building as being invisible. So, so this was actually not a way to continue working on this project. Basically, even though I was testing some sort of smoke and mirrors options, which has been historically like tested for making some things invisible, mostly by magicians. But I started thinking about like more about the concept of unapprehending the building, and this is also something which actually the work comes from Monica. So what you actually see, so yeah, maybe I should make it a bit shorter, but what you actually see on the screen, I don't know if you're looking at full screen, but I hope you do. Yeah, are some sort of...
And excuse me, Ivana, you have already taken about 6 to 7 minutes. And if you can end up with showing the real image of how the museum looks now, and okay, finish your talk in the next, say, about 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I just want to conclude with saying that basically this deep time of making the work, this actually is about like long-term inquiry into something and then conversation with Raqs in this case. And then the question from the outside, which then actually makes something appear or disappear. And just 1 second, I will now show the work. Okay.
Yeah, we can see you. Yeah.
Okay. Now?
So do you have an image? Shuddha, could you show an image of how the museum looks now? Because we showed it in the beginning, but...
I just shared the screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, so this is the image of the work. So you can see a resemblance of the stripes that you were saying before. And here it's actually not possible to take a photo, but you can see some sort of vibration which appears when you come close to the museum. More one moves backwards, the structure becomes like more flat, even though something is happening in peripheral vision. But in the end, what one has as the full building is just the building is still present, but its presence is annulled. So basically it opens some sort of other imaginations, I hope, some sort of on the trace of psychedelic minimalism that that's what we're also talking about. So thank you.
Well, wonderful, thank you. In fact, I wish that museums are not made invisible in real. In fact, all those characters who are causing much harm to this world and humanity, if they could be made invisible, that would be preferred, because museums contain a huge legacy and history, and which is so relevant and necessary for the civilizational context. But that's on the lighter side of it. I'm sure this idea is wonderful. And now I move on to our next artist, which is Naim Mohamed. He is, of course, from Bangladesh, but now working in New York, and it's early in the morning there, and he's been up, I think, since I don't know what time. Anyways, Naim would talk to us about the film which he was commissioned for by the Triennale organizing committee, of course, the Raqs Media. And I would like him to talk about where and how did he kind of shoot the film, make the film, what are the contents of the film. It's titled Care. And as Raqs Media also talks about care and friendship and love and affinity, which is much more needed during these times, of course, because we humans have now at least realized that how important it is to be human, to be in contact with each other, because everything else may vanish. everything else may be kind of, illusional, but the real contact, real human beings are real. There is no alternative to that. So I'll request Naeem to share about experiences and how he was asked about it and how he experienced it, how he reacted to those challenges. Naeem, please.
Thank you, Diwan, and thank you, Raqs, for organizing today, and the entire Triennale, and the Yokohama team, of course, for doing amazing work in which many of us couldn't participate but had to be long distance. Because time is limited, maybe what I'll talk about specifically, which is the context we are in, how it played out, Raqs's original invitation versus the making of the film, and then the interruption of the crisis, the current crisis, which has of course transformed all our lives, including the making of work, including travel. You mentioned I live in New York. The film was shot in Kolkata, in West Bengal, and there were all sorts of disruptions throughout the process that then went somehow into the film. So Raqs I've known, I guess, like about as long as perhaps Ivana mentioned. I first met them in 2005 when I was part of a collective called the Visible Collective. And I've always admired Raqs's ability to continue to function as a collective after all these years, because our collective could not continue. We eventually had diverging plans and life paths. I always find it interesting also, even the way they work together, even in a moment. The passing of the baton, as it were, is part of any conversation with them, either in public or in the studio. And so Raqs had invited me last summer, with a very specific provocation, which was not only the idea of care and caregiving. Of course, some of the context was some of the things that we had discussed post-Fukushima, many of us, but also what happens to the caregivers afterwards, after a surpassing event, as it were. And Raqs knew that in my personal life, I had functioned as a caregiver for some people, navigating hospitals both in Bangladesh, India, and the US. So navigating doctors speaking in different language, but always kind of speaking in this hieroglyphics at times that we have to decode. And the original invitation was perhaps to actually explore the actual real life experiences, but I decided, partially for what I could do, to make a fiction film. And this will show that the conversation definitely was last summer, about a couple where they basically refused medical treatment. And obviously in the context of today, the adversarial relationship that the two characters in my film have with the hospital and the hospital's invisible staff is perhaps something we will all experience in the future, but perhaps right now is not a time when we are questioning doctors and their decision making quite in the same way, because the current crisis requires all sorts of suspension of disbelief. The way that the current event, of course, intervened is we started filming. We filmed in an abandoned hospital in Kolkata, in the Boro Bazar area of Kolkata. And we filmed we started work in December, we filmed in January. I went to Delhi to show the rushes to Raqs and discuss, and had some great feedback from all three of them, especially Jeebesh, in a long session, with the plan to continue filming in February, March, and April, and then in little pieces. And then, of course, the pandemic intervened, all filming stopped, and maybe it took until almost early April for us to finally decide, we are not going to be able to go back to this building, because if nothing else, the production team, many of them had already by then scattered from Kolkata to their villages or mofussil areas, and there was no question of bringing them back, even if it was safe to do so. So it's also a film that was finished without finishing the filming, but we made a virtue of that. It's hard to say too much about the film without, of course, showing something about it. I will say that the idea of refusing medical treatment now seems a strange thing to say, because I've experienced, of course, friends of mine in Bangladesh who have now either their parents or they themselves, in one close friend's case, both parents and himself got sick. And I saw that when people were getting sick with what we thought was COVID, suddenly we were willing to do anything, go to any pharmaceutical company and try to do whatever we can to get this, in the Bangladesh case, Remdesivir, there's a Bangladeshi local generic version that's been allowed. And so suddenly everybody we know is trying to get Remdesivir, trying to get oxygen tanks, trying to do all these things to supplement the hospital. So a film about the refusal of medical treatment, maybe skepticism about some of the end of life things that hospitals can allow, the possibility to keep people alive on a machine much longer than perhaps their body can, now feels just like a, it seems like a conversation from another time, although I'm sure we'll have those conversations again. Maybe I can show a small clip from the film if that's okay.
Yeah,
like
please do that.
Clip. Yeah, I'll just do that, even though it'll be inadequate.
একবার অপেক্ষা ঘরে দেখলাম একটা টেবিলের নিচের তাকে তসবিহ আর জায়নামাজ কেউ রেখে গেছে, পরের আগন্তুক যাতে ব্যবহার করতে পারে প্রয়োজন মতো। হয়তো মূল মালিকের প্রয়োজন ফুরিয়ে গেছে বা এই যাত্রা রক্ষা পেয়েছে। অনেকক্ষণ তাকিয়েছিলাম তসবিটার দিকে। ওই যে মুজতাবা আলী সেই গল্প, দীর্ঘ এরো স্ট্রিপের শেষ প্রান্তের দিকে ধ্যানের মতো। ভাবলাম এ থেকে সান্ত্বনা পাবার মতন মন মানসিকতায় মুক্তি আছে। দেখা যায় যে কোনো পরিবার, আমাদেরটাও, এইসব মুহূর্তে বৈজ্ঞানিক আর ধার্মিকের মধ্যে ভাগ হয়ে যায়। কেউ ডাকে দেবতার নাম, আমাদের জন্য তো মেলা দেবতা, কাকে ডাকবো তাই ভাবি। আর বাকি দল, তারা সাধারণত অপেক্ষাকৃত ছোট। তারা নানা গবেষণা করে, যাত্রাটা বুঝতে চায়, কোথায় কি হচ্ছে, কোন অস্ত্র কাজে দেবে। জগদীশচন্দ্র বুঝেছিলেন উদ্ভিদের প্রাণ আছে, আমাকে কাটলে আমি ব্যথা পাই, চিৎকার করে।
So let me stop there because want to be mindful of everybody's time. The clip I selected somewhat at random, but as I was playing, I realized that it gets to something else that I didn't get a chance to talk about, which is certainly something I've experienced inside my family, which is that at certain points of medical crisis, when it appears to be that there is nothing more to do, that's when I found, certainly in my family, those who are more pious, they actually have more of a center of calm, because then there is still something for them to do, which is to not only talk about what God intended, but to reshape what is about to happen to the person into something that God had intended anyway, with the exception, of course, if it's somebody young. But so far in my family, all the medical crises have happened to people at the time when you would expect it, perhaps. And so then the typical phrase in Bangla is, Allah chechilen, God had wanted it, and so this was the time. And so, of course, for the rationalists, or for the people who want to really understand the medical process, that's a profoundly confounding moment, because you want to believe in the mastery of humans, whether the doctor, the hospital, or you yourself as the family caregiver, to overcome this moment and to face the limits of what you can actually overcome with medicine or machines or hospital is, it's a profoundly transformative thing that I've experienced, and I'm sure many others have and are doing right now as well. So I'll just mention one book that was important for me, in addition to the source material that Raqs had shared, which is Atul Gawande's a chapter from his earlier book called Complications, and then the new one called Being Mortal, which is an expansion of the chapter, where he basically argues that there can be times when one sees as medical treatment. And the chapter in the original book is called Whose Life Is It Anyway? So this idea that the person who is ill should also decide how they want to have their last days, if those are their last days. So I'll stop there and pass the baton back to you, Diwan.
Thank you so much, Naeem. And it's so very relevant what you're doing. And during these times, we have seen that, healthcare workers and, security forces, or we will be coming later to one aspect of the Triennale in which there are a lot of people who are doing the cleaning, act, and how important it is during today's times, and Thank you so much. Although you've taken a little bit extra, but I allowed you so because your voice was very audible, and the video clip was also very important. And I request the other artists who are coming now. I have no kind of constraints with time, but I am concerned about viewers that they might lose interest if we carry on taking so much of time. Otherwise, I personally would like to listen to it for as long as possible, because that's how we kind of challenge the existing notions, because artists are the ones who are actually going to give us some kind of a solution during these times when political class or the bureaucracy or other systems or managing people, they fail to do anything to the society when the society is dismayed and they do not know what is going to happen in the future, and people are really in doldrums. So then artists, I think, becomes more responsible and should take upon the responsibility of providing at least some alternative solutions, if not real solutions. Now I come to Asako Iwama, and I request Asako to kindly first respond how Raqs Media kind of connected with her, with artists, and then what was that came to the artist's mind when this idea was floated with artists, and how it was dealt with. Asako.
So first, I think I had contact by email with Jeebesh, 2018, maybe December.
Asako,
and I know.
Kindly allow me to interrupt. It would
Yes.
be very nice if you could also show some images of your work. Is it possible?
Yes, yes. I never done this on my share, but I think so. It's okay. So now my part of the film that I'm gonna show, which is related to archive of my father.
You can continue talking about the work.
So, yes, okay. So because there's maybe, I'm sorry, maybe I should not go too much that direction. So, so that's my father was passed away after I spoke with Jeebesh. Just very brief. That maybe I'm gonna stop that in here, because simultaneously I'm listening my voice of that voiceover and I'm talking. So maybe I just gonna stop at here. Sorry, I can't share that all of things. But this image is what I right now shared that is related to my father's archive. It was very interesting because 2018 that just started to talk with Jeebesh, and then my father passed away 2019 in February. And he was a research sociologist on the farmland of the Sri Lanka. He started to go there from 1968 until 2008. And he was visiting different farmland from north and south and also middle. And then, so there was a huge field notes and also very random pile of photographs, and also some of the books which is published in the 1970s related to hunger and not arm, but the food. So those kind of like very self-initiated many publication which is published in Sri Lanka, my father corrected. So, and then that I couldn't, we needed to clean up his house, and then I couldn't read of it. So I sent it 15 boxes from Japan to Berlin. And this is a story about my father's view to the Sri Lanka, where I never been. I actually planned to go there when it's this possibility to show something in the Triennale. But then I planned in this March to go there and then film out there some of the landscape where my father been. Unfortunately, that's pandemic and I couldn't go. So I created a narrative by my own subjectivity, like single subjectivity, and then try to figure out that where that my father was and then that who he met. And it's very interestingly that Raqs shared with us at the very beginning that some of the sources, And then there was one of the keywords was very important, that friendship. And it's funnily, I found that my father's handwritten small memo, which is saying that it's, I have to write about my friends, whatever that is, whatever cause, I have to bring it to the world, that their narrative. And then that's made me to question that. It's like, he was a researcher, sociologist, and then this who he met in Sri Lanka was the, let's say, target being that as be researched, but my father was calling some of the people as a friend. So that's made me to really start to question a lot about what is meaning of friendship, such a one direction perspective. Is that was one direction perspective or not? This was in my this video question. Also that I put a layer of the different landscape, because for me, my father passed away by the reason because he was alcoholic and he was dissolving his body. And then for me, this was a very important aspect as like body as a landscape, one of the landscape where he had been in Sri Lanka, northern area where was that blocked, and then he couldn't go after 1985. That area is also kind of like one of the landscape which I can't visit, or maybe he couldn't visit. And so this kind of also a couple of landscape which is related to my father and me, I try to layer into the my installation work. Yeah, so.
Are you done?
Yes, I'm done.
So you can stop.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Within the
yes,
let us
yeah,
see.
Okay.
Asako, you can talk a little bit about the garden and this whole landscape. Like that's very important, because between plantation, the garden, the landscape, the wild, and the,
yes,
a little bit, because that's very important part of the whole thinking.
Yes. Okay. So that the garden, which is my father, where that I grown up is really suburb of Tokyo, and the where that is like a land just cut it out of the mountain to build it, that's like American type of identical houses. And my father didn't like it, just green grass garden. So he started to cultivate all the soil to replace it to the humus, and then that he made it that huge investment to the soil itself, and made it to that almost jungle. That this garden, my childhood house garden, become like a jungle, and so, but this was parallel during he was researching on Sri Lanka, and then that's where that northern area was conflicted, and he couldn't be in ever again. So that was quite interesting, and then and that's very sadly we saw that house, and then that moment that the trees was all cutted, which was my father grew by himself. That it's like many plants were edible, like fruit trees, and then like some birds brought it some seed, and then they naturally grow some of the fruit trees. And but my father, when that he got really hospitalized in that maybe like 5-6 years ago, that garden become too jungle, and the neighbor really complained. So that during he was in hospital, that's somehow that all tree was cut it and digged all roots, and then that's disappeared. So this parallel somehow that's with his body dissolving, and then that's poisoning himself, couldn't stop to drink all those things, and the garden growing, but in the end somehow cut it down, almost washed away that way. And this story also very much related to my father's, where that he born, that it's that's up north of that called Kamaishi, that Tohoku prefecture in Iwate. Sorry, Iwate prefecture in Tohoku. And then that's actually that my father came from, and then that's the tsunami hit, and then that his grown-up house was washed away. And in that house, he had many books where he researched also on the Sri Lanka and so on. So that's books I saved it also too, even though they were really mold and then that sunk into the ocean. So this kind of like very weird layer of that natural catastrophe, ethnic conflict, and then that one person's addiction, somehow this dissolving that certain things to certain direction, which made me, it was such a weird synchronizing about that dialogue with Raqs Media Collective, yes.
Okay, Asako, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your
Very nice.
I wish that we could see a little bit of your face as well, because most of the time it was
Yes, sorry.
being
Yeah.
shared.
Yeah, so I didn't know how to not share.
All right, that's okay. Thank you so much
you so
once
much.
again. Now I'll invite Amol Patil and ask him to kind of the way his work shaped and progressed. And you know, Bombay. You live in Bombay, I suppose. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, India and Japan, in a way, we call Oriental society. And how did you kind of respond to this, invitation of creating artwork which was going on another port city? Because Bombay is also a port city. And
Yeah.
how was your work kind of imagined and executed ultimately?
So basically, when I just first time I shared my work with Raqs, and then after that I just had a conversation with Monica to so we had first talk about two works. There's a hand gloves and the 4-channel Walkman work. So I think the overall the display also you can see there's all are different time period of works and different time period of work. So these are some of the works are kinetic. Some of the works, almost, almost some of the works are kinetic, and then, but you can see the whole display. There's there's a look like a still image, but you can go closely. You can see the small motions and movements. So that motion is also kind of for me to kind of uh, uh, meditation all the senses, breathing and taking breathing and the working process also. So then you can see the one sorry, I don't have images. So now there is one hand gloves work, that relation about the sanitized worker. They're working on the garbage area. There is a lot of black water. They're now moving inside insects, and motions they're working on the dark spaces, and that process coming from this the work to create the kinetic hand gloves work. And then there's the 4-channel Walkman also. You can see there is a 3 sounds, mosquito sounds recorded by my father, and my father is a scriptwriter and actor. So he recorded the mosquito sound, and then I recorded 2 different sounds and mixed together. So basically, that the conversation also the 4-channel and the sound travel. So I have a few dialogue related to Walkman, the kind of husband and wife conversation and with machine. So can I just quickly just read the small dialogue? Yeah. So where is the time? I don't have to check a watch. Sirens tell me the time. Don't 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 you go deaf? Human is machine here. They both dance together. Flying cotton dust everywhere. There's a 3 shifts. Mine is from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. A time comes when we hear nothing. Why is everything so still here? It will get over today or tomorrow. We thought, but the sick machine seems dead to me now. So the whole Walkman, the whole sound work, the 4-channel sound work, and the other works also the no relation to machine and human. So that kind of whole the display also, and the whole works also going very well to about the Yokohama, the whole idea also, because the some of the motions also is in relation to Japan earthquake motions. So you can see my kinetic works motions also is look like really similar. The kind of the kind of the earthquake vibrate. Yeah.
Yeah, are you done?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so now I thank you so much, Amol. I wish we could see some of your work, but nevertheless, maybe someday later we will be able to show you. I did try to show one of your works by sharing the screen, but I wonder whether I was able to manage or not.
Yeah.
Now I will invite Shuddha again, or the Raqs Media, anybody amongst them who wants to pitch in to kind of show some more slides if they wish to.
Divan, actually, let's let the artist flow go on, then we can come in the end and have all our discussion.
Okay.
Because it's going, the momentum is nice.
Divan, we're also seeing your screen. You probably want to stop sharing.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. In fact, how to kind of do
if somebody else shares, I think that will cancel you.
Yeah, I'm trying to go into the Zoom session. I have gone into something else, in fact. Okay.
Personal.
Still sharing. Stop share. Okay, now it's done. All right, thank you. So now I'll invite Yoi Kawakubo, and let's see what Yoi Kawakubo has to share with us, because in my plan of things, I was supposed to kind of invite Shuddha to share some more artworks, but as Jeebesh has rightly suggested, that let the flow of the artists carry on.
Okay.
Is Yoi on?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen so that maybe you can see some of the works, perhaps. Okay, so or maybe I just share the
You could also touch upon this aspect, like most of the artists, like Oriental, living in Oriental culture, but practicing in a Western culture. How do you navigate this shift of cultures, which is a continuous problem? You keep kind of shuttling between.
But there is also half Oriental, like.
Pardon?
Ivana, you're half Oriental?
Maybe.
Yes, no, I think for me, it's kind of, as you say, or someone talked about, it's like there is a global culture. So when I was born in Spain, and at 18, I moved to Japan, and then I moved to London. And so then when I ask, where are you from? It's very difficult to answer. So in that sense, I think it's like in the end, the place you call home, or the place when you arrive, your phone automatically connects to the Wi-Fi, is the place where you belong to, in a way. So I think it's becoming some kind of a different structure of culture, which I think is very interesting. So yeah, briefly, I'm gonna perhaps show some images of the installation so that people can have an idea. Let's see. So is people seeing and the green walls room? So that is the process. That is an image of the day of the installation. So it was done remotely, and then there are some paintings of my father that in his early career he did some paintings, copies of El Greco to learn his technique. And then there is a big screen on the back that is showing a film that it's, well, you can see the projector here. I don't have images of the installation as finished, but the film is showing a project that I presented to Raqs about a process of having an octopus, living with an octopus for a year, and then documenting this process of living with it and interacting and creating something with the octopus. How would it feel to create something with an octopus? It's really difficult to see what I am sharing, actually. I'm gonna try to share. Are you seeing, what are you seeing now? You are seeing my desktop, perhaps?
No, we are seeing some of the images. Some
okay. So
Your
are you
desktop,
seeing?
yeah, beautiful.
The desktop, okay. So it's so complicated. So let's, okay. So then I started also researching about the structures of the body and the centralized body of the humans and the decentralized body of octopuses, and tried to do like a reenactment of the surrendering to your own body or to your instincts through the act of trying to become an octopus, which is kind of a very traditional way of trying to find a path of transcendence in many mystical traditions. And then at the same time, another pillar of the film is research into the structures of legitimacy, of authorship and authority. So one of the questions that Raqs posed me at the beginning, it was like, how would it be if you self-learn or start learning about the Olympics from zero? And then I started being very interested in this kind of mountains of hierarchy, like the Nobel Prizes that are the climax for sciences, Olympics and medals that come from Zeus and it's the top of the sport, and the biennials and triennials that are in art. How do we, well, especially I started researching about the biennial of Venezia and how it kind of borrows from the Christian tradition, from San Mark, the golden lion, the tradition of the relics and these things. I think I'm going 5 minutes. So, so in the end, I just want to share a little clip of a video that I don't know if you're gonna be able to hear, but perhaps just see. And it's interesting because the octopus didn't come, so my project failed, and the film became like a record of a failure. So, and the very interesting question comes like, with the pandemic, many things didn't go as planned. And so I think this surrendering to failure, or the redefining of what failure is, I think is quite important, because it's like living with the virus or with poison. So if you try to fight it, eventually there is a dichotomy, or like antagonism between the two sides. But once you surrender to the failure, I think it changes a lot, because I think it's the only way to kind of live in a world that you cannot see the future, or you have to live with the day that you are given. So roughly, the film it's a documentation of the process of the film, and how it is slowly failing, and how it is evolving. And the title is called Waiting for Diogenes, and is quite inspired in Godot, no, in Beckett and in German. So briefly, yeah, that's that's from my side. Diwan, I think you're in mute. your microphone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yoi. And it was
Thank you.
Watching some visuals and listening to your thought processes, how and and of course your father's paintings and the process of displaying everything was extremely interesting to watch. Now I'll invite Renuka Rajiv. Renuka Rajiv, I believe, lives in Bangalore, if I'm not incorrect. Is that right, Jeebesh?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Mute.
So,
Yeah,
so,
you say that muted.
please talk about your work.
My work. I mean, I just like working by hand. I like working with paper and fabric. So yeah, I kind of just make work. So I mean, I think for the Triennale, it was kind of a mix of old and new work. So I think some of the older work, yeah, I guess it was possible to think of the different ideas in connection to older work a bit easier. So there might be elements of friendship and I think personal toxicity. Apart from that, I think, yeah, I was just making work, like some stitching and some paper mache.
And what were the like apart from the materials, what was the thought behind creating this work? What did they ask you, or were you asked specifically to create a body of work which was relevant to this particular triennale, or you came upon an idea of your own that this is what I want to share?
No, I think we actually discussed the structure of the space, which I think, because I think somewhere from the early conversations, I think maybe Monica and Jeebesh also figured that structural kind of, formation would make more sense, and then something could happen within that. And I think it was hard for me to also kind of give much indication of what would happen within that. But I think, yeah, somewhere the material is means to the thinking, I guess. So it happens along the way.
Do you have some images to show? Can you share?
No, I have no images.
I think I should just perhaps just join in a little bit in this conversation, because actually in the conversation with Renuka was a very organic process. We had so it was we had seen Renuka's work in Delhi in an exhibition that she had done here. And what we found really interesting was the fact that, as she said very, very cryptically, the relationship between the personal and the toxic, but also the presence, cohabiting with other people, the presence of others was a very important part of the world that she created. And of course, in the range of forms. But the dialogue, I think, happened like this. No, Renuka, we would just talk, and when she was coming by to Delhi, we would look at older work and just sort of, and then we would just talk about what we were thinking around. So it was not necessary, it wasn't for us, it wasn't like, Renuka, why don't you make something about X? She talked about some of the things that she was working with, and she was...
I think there was some good faith involved also. Because after a point, I felt like it was not so much about discussion, it was not so much about, figuring it out through a conversation. I think even the conversations are quite open in that way. And I mean, especially because we were looking at books and stuff initially, none of which made it into the work. So yeah, there's one image.
Yeah.
That's actually a work that, Rebecca, you said that you had made after the lockdown started.
Yeah. No, I mean, in a sense, because lockdown started in March, so I guess the new body of work inevitably happened, during the whole lockdown, extension of lockdown. I mean, now this sort of semi-post-lockdown stage, whatever it means.
Anything else you like to share, Monica or Renuka?
One thing that Renuka said was interesting is this idea of the structure. One of the things that, because we knew the space, knew the kind of modality, and one of the things is she makes this beautiful, they make this beautiful book. And one of Vidya did a exhibition in Delhi in last January or February, I don't remember, where this book were accordion. So what we tried was to think of a spatial dynamic that could speak to that logic of her unfolding, that she produces extreme, they produces extreme intimacies, and then portraits of unfolding happens. I think
No, actually, that's interesting because I feel like I think in my own what do you say? Thinking of a body of work, actually, I'm just figuring out some kind of structure and repetition also, you know, and then whatever happens within that kind of a.
All right. Thank you so much, Renuka and Monica, for actually clarifying a little better for us how does Monica's mind work and how she kind of achieves what she achieves. Now we have Kabelo Malatsie waiting for a long time, and also Masaru Iwai. Do you think I invite Raqs in between, or you still stick to the idea of kind of continuing with the flow?
I think we continue with the flow, and then with after Kabelo, then Masaru, then we can all have a little bit of. There are some questions also in the viewers, and we have a little zigzag.
Because I have a certain other things in mind, because like then I'll come later. Let me invite Kabelo Malatsie, because she's also part of the Discursive Justice Ensemble along with Malatsie, along with Lantian Z, and let us see how. Because living in that part of the world and having this kind of an ensemble, and what does this Discursive Justice Ensemble really look into? What are their concerns, and how do they kind of become part of this Triennale, and in which way do they contribute? And this part of episode being in Johannesburg, and do you wish to take it to Triennale in there? In Japan. And is she there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you for the invitation. So I think Lee has spoken about the overarching thoughts and ideas of what we've been doing with discursive justice. So I'll maybe just speak more around what it looks like, or also tangibly. It's a bit hard to also for us to articulate a little bit clearly what it looks like, more than the kind of deliberations we've been doing, the three of us. So in Joburg, or maybe let me start actually with, we had a sequence. So the first one was episode 1, an after party, and that was meant to happen in Hong Kong. We were excitedly all gonna go to Hong Kong and have a party, a com party with DJ Fetstocky and Hype Woman being Fulton Lakey, and Jerome Reyes would have a work in a building, a banner, and of course Corona had other ideas, so that didn't happen. And we are hoping it happens in some form a bit later on. And so that party would have inaugurated our deliberations. And discursive justice is a difficult one to grasp, because it's not quite, it's about speech and performance, and what the court doesn't really allow. So most of the texts that we've been reading about discursive justice are quite difficult cases where they take forever, cases of land claims, custodian of land, cases around sexual work as well. And these cases often require a particular, you have to think about the court and the procedures of the court. And within that thinking, the court itself is unable, or I think Nelson Mandela, when he was being tried for the Rivonia trial, said that the court itself was illegitimate. It was unable to deal with what he was being tried for, the idea of justice and the idea of the South African state at that time being an illegitimate state that then tried him for something that I guess was not gray. I mean, it was very black and white, but the system itself that was trying him was illegitimate. And so those are the kind of like the spaces that we've been deliberating on, these cracks these very difficult spaces of justice that are not always heard and also can't be heard. There are questions of language, which language is spoken, which kind of system even, like justice system, is being used to try or to even gain justice. So those are kind of like the spaces that we've been trying to find ways of not necessarily articulating and representing in an exhibition, but to try and insert other ways of being together, of also sharing, not so much in kind of broad terms like solidarity and those kind of big claims, but giving space. So giving space for other ways of being together and other ways of deliberating. So the GOM party for us was that one space where the idea of, I mean, in South Africa, during the struggle, the tavern, the shebeen, which is, I guess, like a place where you have alcohol and play music, was an important space. It was a discursive space. It was an intellectual space. So a party on one level is not just a party. Of course, there is the dancing that happens, and even that dancing has an important function when thinking around the larger ideas around protest and struggle and liberation formations. So yeah, I think I'll be out of time very soon. So the first episode would have been in Hong Kong, and the second episode, which is taking place now in Johannesburg, was around a scenography. We're titling it Scenography of Suspended Time. And we are thinking around, I think, which I've already mentioned, the space of perpetrator and victim, which is the current law system. It's very black and white in that way. And it doesn't also question on how the perpetrator becomes a perpetrator. So in the case of Nelson Mandela being a perpetrator, it's the state that creates him to be a perpetrator, and not necessarily that he, like, I guess, decides in a sense to be one. So, and now I'm using like very direct reference, but we actually were thinking around, we came to this thinking around a heron and a fish. So when a heron tries to fish, the one idea is that you will side with the fish because the fish is gonna die. And so it's very easy to be more remorseful and think about the fish as the victim and not think about the heron and what the heron essentially inherently, what it has to do to feed itself and all of this. So in Johannesburg, we're thinking around the spaces between those moments, not necessarily thinking about perpetrator and victim, but rather the time outside of that moment. The space where we think about the entire system and what that system essentially enables and kind of forces things to happen. So, I mean, one story is the heron and the fish that we have. I think I have an image, so I'll try and share my screen and show you. How does this work exactly? Okay, so in Johannesburg, we decided to use a house in a neighborhood in Lawrenceville as the space, and instead of I guess a regular art space. And here we were thinking about the house itself as another place that gives you, that stages the scenography. So instead of using the art space to then stage the scenography. We use the house to stage the scenography. Just finding it. Okay.
So,
can you see?
yes, we can.
Okay. So when Lantian was in Johannesburg last year, we happened to see this house together. And at the back of the house, there's a pond. And this pond has fish. And so while we saw this pond, we also heard the story of a heron fishing in a pond. And our deliberation then became about the story of the heron and fish. And there was also stories around copper and copper complaints that we've used within the scenography to also think not only of the micropolitics, but also to think about different timelines as well, like the copper plate that we complaint that we were looking at is one that is took place at Babylonian times. So it's a very old complaint, service complaint that we've included in the scenography. So our time of thinking of justice is not just thinking about justice today and the inequalities that are happening all around us, but thinking about it as something that has been happening for a much longer time.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kabelo. The others must be wondering why I was so lenient with Kabelo, because Kabelo represents that part of the world from where there were not many artists in this discussion. So we had quite a few from Japan and 2 from India. And so I thought, because it's very important to, to share diverse cultures and how people from diverse cultures come up with different ideas, different kinds of, suffering, pain, agony, joys, and questioning. And that's what was more important. That's why I think I have indulged a little bit. And we have a shared history of suppression and depression and colonization. And there's so many things which India and Africa does share. So thank you so much, Kabelo and Malatsie. Now I'll invite Masaru Iwai. He's been waiting for a long time. And we'll talk about his creation, which is Boom Stars. And this Boom Stars is what? Like the Safai Karmachari in a way, the cleaners, people who have become so much important during these pandemic times in India. And in fact, these are the people who have who are on the margins, have been marginalized, and they do work very hard. And these are the people who have actually kept our lives in a way, and us a bit sane in this time of insanity. And they are the real heroes. And Masaru has created a body of work which runs through the length and width of the city, Yokohama, and cleaning activity which is continuing and will continue throughout the Triennale, or maybe later. He'll share it with us, Masaru Iwai. Thank you.
Thank you. Hear me? Okay. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak here today. I introduced my project, the Bloom Stars. Before, I met Raqs in 2019, maybe February or January, I think.
January.
Yeah. And so we talking about, I remember about the dirty and the toxicity, toxicity substance never disappear in our planet. And then so we have to care about the toxicity. And then, but so I don't know, I don't get about the episode. So let's say the episode thing, but I didn't get about what's episode for the connecting in the Yokohama Triennale. But we discuss about what's episode and what's Yokohama Triennale.
or blah blah. And then so step by step I get the episode also. And then so I proposed the Bloomsters in December 2019. So the Bloomsters are direct translation from Japanese and Chinese into English means comet. This project Bloomsters is based on radioactive decontamination. To consider our relationship with contamination in our daily life, that means we have to continue to care. We have to continue to think about it. But I don't talk about specific area. I don't focus specific contamination this time. Then the dust masks use decontamination like this. It's professional one. So very much high quality things. So, but for this project, paperback, I think like, yeah, I painted the graphite, the surface, on the surface. Yes. It is material. So graphite is very much interesting materials because used to make pencil lead, this one here. And then also used to neutron modulator in the world's first nuclear reactor. The further, the plutonium produced in this nuclear reactor were used in the nuclear bomb that were dropped on Nagasaki. So well, the mask require customization by the participant. So I will show you the some photos.
One thing, one of the most interesting thing that when we met Masaru, we met very early. Masaru, there are a lot of the artists we met very early. One of the things is that the idea of the episode developed with him actually. And what is interesting is that Masaru whole experience have been working as a worker artist, some kind of worker artist in Fukushima cleaning of the toxic. And that is where we understood the deep question of the toxic, how you hide the toxic thinking it is gone away. But actually the series of delayed and postponement that produces a relationship with the toxic and us.
So how can I sharing?
Share screen is at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, I know, but find it on. So can I? I needed the permission, and sorry.
It's.
Do you have some picture, D1?
Pardon?
Do you have some picture?
I think it'll be
okay.
Masaru, you have permission though, because we all have permission to share screen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then
you got it?
I got it, but so sorry, it's difficult to.
But we can see a picture, you know, as your backdrop. There is somebody, you know, the cleaning job.
Just do that for the rest of the presentation.
It's this one. It's a cleaner, and I'm interested about. Okay, so
I think you can continue with your talk. It'll be better.
Mm-hmm. And then do you have a Instagram?
Yeah, we can see some kind of a screen being shared by somebody.
Shuddha is sharing.
Okay. So, but Masaru, you
yeah,
can.
Anyway, so I introduced about that, and the participants customize using the product package or something. It's like a chocolate or some noodle and some package, cutting and sticking it together. Afterwards, they will see a how-to video I made throughout the decontamination process. This video is only participants will be able to watch it. Then the participants will be asked to cleaning on space or public space with own mask. And also take documentary photos for the evidence. You mean the, and then I participant in episode 06 at Yokohama Triennale. And at the same time, Bloomsters is made up of participants' episode. It's like a relation and the universe and the cell, you know. So episode makes episode, like. And it's beginning, but I'd like to end my talk by introducing a few participants and the approach to cleanup action they are taking. So one participant works at the facility for people with disabilities. He told us that he every month clean up the area around the facility with people with disabilities. When I asked him why he does it, he replied that it was to make the community aware of our existence. What's interesting is that when he joined Bloomsters, the cleanup seems to take on different meaning than the facilities activities, because it's more personal. And the next, one participant also told us that his father died after first workshop, but he was unable to go home and attended the online funeral from Tokyo because people are afraid that he is going to be back from a contaminated area. The photo he sent me was of him cleaning the roof of the apartment where he lives. He wanted to clean as close to the sky as possible. So yeah, here is not enough time to talk about all the episode in this way. Also, this program will continue to move throughout the duration of Yokohama Triennale, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. Thank you.
Thank you.
I should just mention that if people want to see on Instagram, if they just look for hashtag Broomstars, right? Then you can see so many amazing modifications that people have done of their own masks and their actions in the city of, or in this city and lots of other places. So it's worth looking on Instagram.
Everybody watching looks like yeah, okay, but
brilliant.
Yes, and yeah, please check in the Instagram and the hashtag Bloomsters, please.
Thank you, Masaru. That's interesting. What kind of visuals this virtual background screen creates for us, that sometimes mostly unintended, but that becomes an interesting visual in itself. And now I'll come back to the Raqs Media. And because I have a certain, a few more things which, because this Biennale, Triennale has about 67 artists participating in it from various parts of the world. And we cannot be talking about all of them due to shortage of time, which we would have loved to do. But there are some things which I found interesting because I haven't had the opportunity to see all of them. One of these is another episode in which they have Yokohama Museum, in which they have Chasing the Scent, curated by fashion design collective Pungent. If they could talk about that. And then again, there is another artist, Takashi Arai's daguerreotypes of kind of militaristic history. And these are also, I think, very interesting visuals as well as statements which they made. And Eva Fabrega's tangles also I found a little interesting if they could talk about. And then the episode 10, Digital Ignition of Afterglow, which I think I leave it to the Raqs Media, which part they wish to touch upon, which they don't want to. And later on, there is one more thing which I think they've added is ringing of the bell, which is continuously ringing and which will continue ringing throughout the next 1,000 days. And its relevance to the Triennale and relevance to the times, and like moving from this time to the futuristic time with this continuous sound of ringing the bells. How do they correlate this with the present and the future? The present day, look up, how do the present day artists look at art, how they create it, how people kind of watch it, how people come into a space prepared to be challenged, and in terms of viewers also. And any one of you, Shuddha, Monica, or Jeebesh, you can sum it up. And during it, if you can share some kind of visuals, that would also be wonderful.
Divan, I just wanted to pick up one question I saw in the YouTube channel.
Yeah, sure.
Lokesh, an artist, Lokesh, is asking Ivana, what is the material? Because there is a confusion whether it's a projection or a material. Ivana, can you just...
Please carry on. That's the question, I think, only question we've had.
Yeah, rest are all very fatigue friendliness, but one question was there. So
you can answer that.
Ivana, Ivana, can you take that question? And Shuddha, can you remove this?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Yeah.
Basically, the material which is in front of the museum is printed mesh. So, and I have some samples here, so I will show you.
Yeah.
Yes or not?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see.
Bring it in front of the screen and don't move it.
So
Then probably will be a bit better.
Yes. I wish I can see how I see it. So, like this.
Yes, now it's a bit clear. We can make some sense out of it.
But it's just banner mesh which is used for banners outside, on which one can print images. So basically, the stripes are printed on the banner, on the mesh of the banner, and
So
they are installed in 2 layers.
Long stripes hung together in a sequence.
Yes. So basically, one surface of the mesh, and then there are stripes printed on this surface. So, and then mesh is...
Yeah, there are 3 layers. Ivana, you have to give the sense of the layer. There are 3 layers of mesh printed that are overlaid to produce the dissolving
effect. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ivana. There seems to be another question probably. Is that because I don't think that that's a question. Anyways, so now I think you can take over the Raqs Media Collective.
Well, I want to start by saying that much as I love the idea of a pungent fragrance coming from the fashion collective, but actually it's called Pugment, and I will invite Lantian or Kabelo to pitch in on that, because actually that's part of the discursive justice trajectory. It is, as Kabelo and Lantian were pointing out earlier, sort of thinking on how one can think of the idea of discourse, which is not sort of within the framework of just the linguistic, but that there are other modes of presence that lay a claim to equality, for example. So anyway, they will talk more about that. To talk about Takashi Arai, so Takashi Arai is an artist who's based, well, he was based in Yokohama, but now has a roving studio because now he's converted an old bus and into a daguerreotype studio, so you can imagine how challenging that would be. But we worked with Takashi in Shanghai Biennale as well. He does work a lot with the daguerreotype. But in the context of Yokohama, as someone whom we knew, we were having conversations with, well, you know, and the drinking and the eating, that is the joy of conversations, especially with like-minded artist friends. And so in the midst of all that, he was talking about these vests that were part of the history of the militaristic history of Japan. When young men would go to fight in the war, there would be these silk vests that would have embroidered on them on this white vest in red knots by not only the members of the family, not only the women of the family, but also women in the neighborhood or in the community. And each of these knots, the ideal vest would have 1,000 knots, and each of these knots was like a stitching of the care and affection from the community, a kind of totemic protection from what could happen in the war. So it became an interesting sort of question as to, is it support? So what Takashi's piece is doing is that he has actually photographed each and every of those 1,000 knots. So there are 1,000 1-inch square daguerreotypes installed in a way in which when you come close to them, a certain sequence of daguerreotypes lights up, and then as you move away, and it goes dark. So there's this kind of play of light and shadow in the space, along with the projection of a film where you have a grandmother, a woman and her daughter, so 3 generations of women who are taking apart these knots, stitching and taking them apart. So for us, it became, in conversation, it is really sort of thinking on the specific history of war, and especially in a context like Japan, where war and a certain kind of militaristic zeal has had such a forefronted tonality, whether it's the samurai or whether it's the wars, the figure of the soldier has got a lot of impact. And then, of course, the care and love that everyone around that young man was offering. Am I talking over Diwan? Anyway, that was just to give you a brief sense of Takashi's project.
All right.
Just can you explain the episode X quickly? The idea is that set up the episode X, and then Shuddha can show some. Shuddha, can you show some images of the episode X?
Oh, did you ask me, Jeebesh?
Yes. Can you do the episode X?
So sure,
why it came up quickly? Like people are, I think.
Very quickly. Sorry. Urgent.
Yeah, urgent.
No, actually, episode X is a response to the times that we live in quite directly, in the sense that so many of us, including the 3 of us, but also all the other artists who are not in Japan, could not travel to Japan to install or to see the exhibition. And anyone outside of Japan can't go right now. So it was a way to think on the question that the internet, obviously the screen is our first mode of engaging with the world, but it's not only a question of giving a shadow of what the exhibition is, but to create a space where you can have an experience of the exhibition which is quite unique to that experience of seeing it on the internet. So we invited artists to create extensions or new forms that could be shown on Episode X online, which is, as it says, a momentary inhabitation of time, so that we can all see or not see, but experience the Yokohama Triennale in a different form than actually going there would be.
So, would Shuddha talk about the ringing bell, or about what we were earlier talking about, the Pungent Collective?
It is pugment. One of the things that deliberation for about 8 months, with this group, Michelle, Lantian, and Kabelo did was have this conversation with a fashion design group called Pugment. You can check their work. They're on Insta, and they're a very, very fascinating group of fashion designer who actually works with our sartorial habits. They don't create anew. They just create with your habit and transform it into a very critical discursive zone. So Lantian, can you just quickly run through the deliberations?
Yeah. So Pugment, we have been speaking with in relation to what they have called recipes for appearance, which in fact intimate one formulation which Kabelo and Michelle and I have been discussing for some time, which I think you can see in fact in robust operation in this Zoom, which I call the stenographer's dilemma. So the story goes, the tribal elder addresses a courtroom in a language that is untranslatable, presenting an object that the court's framework is unable to admit. The elder says that if the object is seen, the world will be destroyed. So the court stenographer turns to the judge and asks, Your Honor, how should I record this? Right, so this is one of our formulations. And in fact, I think since I'm in a kind of raconteur anecdotal mood, one other thing that I'm reminded of, which is another formulation of ours, which reminds me of another formulation of ours in the Discursive Justice cohort, is this joke that I recently heard about workers at a bread line in Soviet Russia. So the workers lament the hours and days spent waiting in line for food. One worker says to another, I'm going to go to the Kremlin and assassinate Gorbachev in the name of dignity and justice. Next day, the would-be assassin is missing from the bread line. The day after, back at the line again. So the others in line say, what happened? Did you get Gorbachev? And the worker says, you know, I went to the Kremlin, but the line to assassinate Gorbachev was even longer. I'll stop there.
All right. So,
Well,
yeah.
I'll take on my place in the line with Episodo X. As Monica was saying, it's we call it a digital ignition. And it's also one of the responses to the idea that the conditions of the pandemic make it difficult for people to assemble and travel. So to the Yokohama Triennale. So then the Yokohama Triennale has to do the work of traveling to the world. So what it does is it grows a kind of digital presence of artists talking about their work or rendering their work or thinking about their work in short videos. So right now, if you went to go to the, if you went to the Episodo X website, you would be able to scroll down and see a whole series of short videos where just like the way we are today right now, 9 artists are present talking about their work, thinking. Here too on the website, you can go and see, for instance, you talked about the ringing bell. Here is the episode of the ringing bell. Dennis Stan, who is an artist who's living in Japan, he's from elsewhere, finds this mode of ringing bell, finding attention to himself, invoking rituals of people ringing bells as a form of prayer in Japanese Shinto and Buddhist shrines, but also calling attention and disturbing the polite consensus of never calling attention to yourself in Japanese society. So there are many ways in which the ringing bell produces different disruptions. And it's also seen as a kind of link between this edition of the Triennale and the next edition. So there is a tree in plot 48 where these bells will be present and anybody will be able to ring them even after the Triennale is over. You can now see on the screen the artist coming towards you. He has this like a contraption with a bicycle bell. Anyway, it just cut out. But it's that mode by which the bicycle bell becomes a kind of way in which he begins to call attention to himself in a very subtle and subterranean manner. So there are many episodos like that in the Episodo X page. You can all go and see different sort of say, iterations by artists representing and thinking about their own work.
There is one question for the deliberation team, which is, I'm wondering why the term justice when you seem to be trying to do away with the very institution that established its definition. Kabelo and Lantian. I have forwarded it to you guys.
Okay.
And there is one more. Well, I'll just take another question. This is for Monica and Shuddha. Hello, Raqs. I'm now out of it. Was there any discussion to create a different kind of physicality and sensibility in the venues between the museum and the Plot 48? If so, can you elaborate a bit? Then Suleiman is asking what are the challenges the pandemic put before the artist fraternity? And there is one from Santosh. Why discursive, considering that often experience, expression, and action of the injustice is fatigue and ineffable? That is for discursive justice. So you have two questions. Lantian.
Kabelo was going to start, Jeebesh.
Yeah, sorry, Lantian and Kabelo.
I'll answer Michelle's question. So I think what we are deliberating on is not the demolition of the institution or the court, but rather that we are arguing that it allows more languages, more voices to be heard. So what we are actually arguing is not for it to be removed, but rather that there are so many communities that have their own ideas around justice that the current system that most of us are using, which is a colonial system, does not allow. So where when one in one of the texts that we read, there's an argument for land, and in that argument, the chief uses mask, totems, dress, song as evidence of their custodianship over land, and those are things that often the court doesn't admit as evidence. So, and also we're deliberating on what the archive, which is often institutional, allows and its protocols. And I mean, in the case of sex workers and even gender-based violence, the evidence that exists isn't always admitted, right? So that's what we are arguing for. We are arguing for a more expensive idea around what the court and admits versus the very protected one that requires us as civilians to speak a different language, to dress particularly different, and to gain evidence that otherwise is almost at times impossible to gain when you're actually at times going against the state itself. So we are arguing for a more expensive idea around justice rather than the very, I guess, very small ones that exist. I hope that answers.
That's right.
Lee?
Lantian doesn't see.
Yes, so I will answer the discursive question, I suppose. I think at the outset, discursive to enter, to call for meaning by making things matter to our thoughts and our time and our deliberations, which is something that, a sentiment that I borrow from Monica. And also, I'm reminded of something that took place recently in Hong Kong with the introduction of the National Security Bill. I believe that the day of, or the day after, I forget, there was this incident in which a football fan was detained by the police on suspicion of inciting independence after being seen to be shouting in the street. And he was later let go and expressed to reporters that he had in fact told police that he was there not for the protest, but to proclaim his love for the Liverpool football team, which had just won the Premiership. And so there was this particular kind of moment in which a regulatory limit protocol happens onto speech, in which we can think speech as a political distinction. And the other example that I would bring is from another practice that we've been looking at through our deliberations. Shino Hashimoto, who is a engine musician, I would say, a technician and driver of motorbikes based in Tokyo. And basically, Shino has a practice which involves making music with her motorbike engine, which I would claim constitutes speech, but one that is rendered as noise insofar as being outside of the legal horizon, and insofar as being denoted as a malign state. So, to render this with more succinctly for you, a conversation that we had was, okay, so if you play the same melody with a piano, it is within the legal purview. You can do so freely within a public setting in Japan. But if you render the same melody with a motorbike engine, it brings it outside of the purview of the legal horizon. So I think in your question about discursivity in relation to speech and the ineffable, what I think you're touching on is something that we've been thinking through a lot, which is where that where that shoreline is.
All right, thank you.
I have a question actually for all the artists, and it's been thinking about it while participating in this today, is that several of you, whether it was Yoi, Naeem, Asako, Ivana, you all talked about this business of doing things remotely, right? Because of the conditions of the pandemic. Now, this was an exceptional circumstances. We had to work around things. But there is also a logic of events like Triennale and Biennale. They're high energy concentrations. People come together from everywhere. There's massive amounts of production that happens. It occurs as an event and then it dissipates. Now, when things will return to normal, assuming this mode will be in operation again. So there is something we lost because of the pandemic. We lost that in concentration of energy, but we also gained something. We gained a capacity to produce a gathering and a concentration of energies remotely by doing things like this, right? Is there a way in which this can produce, and we are doing it very clumsily, even in this Zoom today, we realize that, we don't quite know how to share screens. We don't quite know how to talk, we're learning this as we go along. But I'm assuming that we will get sophisticated in this mode over time. So is there a way in which the logic of how artists produce together, exhibit, show things, discuss things may change as a result of what we've gained from this experience? And the Yokohama Triennale has been, because of it's the first one, so it's a kind of clumsy trailer, I could say, of things to come. An awkward but necessary hesitant step of a different mode of showing things internationally, of producing things together. Based on your experiences, how would you all reflect on that? Sorry.
Who would like to take this question? Asako, would you like to pitch in?
Yes, maybe. I don't know that I have a good answer or maybe response.
We're all thinking aloud in this. So I don't have a question. You don't have a, yeah.
No.
I believe it is going to be a kind of a learning experience, because things are emerging as we do not know anything about COVID. We do not know about its cure. We do not know how humanity is going to be actually impacted by it in terms of numbers of people who lose their lives, and how many people lose their jobs, how many industries get shut, how many people end up suffering endlessly. So similarly, it's happening to the artist's mind. Probably we would find a way in how to first kind of collect our thoughts together, then share it with others, then thinking of producing that material or creating that or executing that idea, then putting it up together and sharing it online. God knows how long we are going to continue, but I wish and imagine that it doesn't happen for too long. But this in itself is a unique experience. But at the same time, as humans do need connectivity, this Zoom or this internet, imagine if the internet was not there, how would we connect with each other? So in a way, technology has come to our help in the way technology is also the maybe root cause of all the ills we are facing today. The toxicity is probably a kind of a byproduct of our progress as as a society, as humans, or as scientists. But at the same time, we are gaining something, we are losing something. Anybody else who wants to pitch in, maybe Monica would certainly have something to say about it.
No, I think one of the things is like one of the things that is very significant is that there is two modes, like Naim's and Asako's and Yoi's are basically the work has to be navigate. It's a video work or a work of sculpture. Like someone's like Ivana's was a very physically demanding work which had needed to be on site. And I think the work would have been different. Not different in the say of what it would have, but the experience of the work would have been very, very different from what it is now for the artist. So in the sense that it is a very tricky space but the marking in the work, inside the work of say Naim or Yoi or Asako, the marking is there. But who will know this story? Frankly speaking, you cannot go around telling the story that I was planning something else happened, or Asako saying I wanted to go to Sri Lanka. The work stands independent of it. I think the work not going to Sri Lanka doesn't take away even a minute from the work. It's actually the pages of your father notebook in this thing becomes much more haunting, because they are a landscape that is not there, because the landscape that he was there went through a genocide, and that you cannot return to it. So in a way that the work becomes something else of a scale that is quite unimaginable if you go and visit and becoming part. So I think we are always grappling with this. We lose something, but another haunting takes over.
But I think that this physical encounter was definitely, for me, this was missing. It was such a confrontation of my own narrative, which I wanted to create it kind of release it in some different direction. So by that meeting with somebody, when I move one place to other place and then meet that person, so my narrative might transform it in a different way. But that was not those kind of drive of that inspiration coming by through direct meeting with people was not there. So it was a very, very hard production process, somehow almost just hitting that head to the wall in some way. I mean, it is good experience also to confront. But then other things was just, I was just so fascinated about Kabelo, what she was talking about it. And this is such a, I want to know more about that, actually more about what she thinking about that space. And so this never happened if maybe this encounter couldn't happen this way. So yeah. So
that's true.
So this fact, I gained, yes.
That energy which resonates, that that atmosphere where all the artists, the curators, the museum directors, the cultural theorists, the thinkers, public, which is ready to consume or be a part of the whole atmosphere, that probably is missing, at least for those who are not able to physically go there. And that kind of prompts me to ask this question Are you kind of monitoring the number of visitors, and is there any feedback by those who are actually visiting the sites and those who are unable to visit? And is there any mechanism through which the Triennale is being made available online in some way or the other?
Well, the Episodo X is actually one of the sort of strategies for making aspects of the Triennale available online. And also if you go on Instagram, a lot of people are obviously posting. The thing is right now you can't, when you buy a ticket, you get a certain amount of time with that. So in a sense, you can't, it's not like the last Triennale, which had, I think, about 300,000 visitors. But this one, from what we understand by the ticketing, it's going to be not more than 100 or 120,000 people. So I believe that there are a lot of people, I see that a lot of people posting on Instagram, which is very interesting. I do believe that on the long weekend, for example, recently it was sold out. This is all we can, but to be honest, the numbers are one aspect, obviously, but I think, for example, looking at room scars on Instagram is actually a very sort of moving experience, because you do see how that the instigation, the provocation that Masaru is giving and how that is taken on and how it's transformed and personified, transformed into the personal, is actually where you can see the affect of what some of the aspects of the triennial quite clearly.
And is there any, can you just share with us how many countries in per se are represented in this? Because it's very difficult to say if somebody is from Japan living in USA, somebody from Bangladesh, but just to give an idea, get an idea of what kind of nationalities or communities are represented, because it's a kind of a cohesive thought process, through which you are trying to give an idea of how the world art community thinks at this point in time, in this year 2020. And because, as we know, Raqs Media is known for its philosophical content, and which is a very thinking kind of a group of people. It's not merely a chance that it happens this way. You must have thought through it. And could you shed some more light on that?
Well, I will not talk about what I will say is that this time, half the artists, at least in the exhibition, have not, I'm talking only about the exhibition, not even about the other sort of tributaries, have never been shown in Japan before. And it is an interesting process when we started to work on the triennial, was to look, because of course you always look at the history of the institution itself, right? Of the museum's relationship with the triennial, and how the triennial has had its the 7th iteration. And also we were interested in narratively how people sort of talk about Japan in terms of, is it a certain kind of insularity, or certain things are happening in Japan. Young people are not making babies, they're not even having sex, for example, or that no one wants to go and travel anymore, they all want to stay home. And it became an interesting process for us to actually look at sort of these fictions or narratives and what is happening underneath that. So it was, in that sense, it was interesting to realize that actually there has been mostly a dialogue, I would say an important dialogue, but a dialogue in the triennial between, say, Europe and Japan. And it was important for us to sort of alter the terms of the dialogue by not necessarily saying, oh, not only the fact that there's, it's a bigger, wider world, and that it's the will to globality is strong, and many people have many things to say, of course, but also the fact that actually the Europe, that if you look at it is precisely what you're pointing out, that there are people who live both in one place and another, that there is a Europe that is in the exhibition, that is a Europe made up of people who are not what you would immediately think of, for example, as European, except that we all know that Europe is as much of a construct of history as India is, right? And I mean, what is India but a 70-year-old construct? So each of these, I think, so what was interesting for us was to actually look at some older trajectories, to bring in arguments that we felt were pertinent to the ways that we were thinking, and perhaps there are places in the world that are more attentive sometimes, or people in certain positions. If you look at Nick Cave's work, for example, which is that explosion of spinners when you walk into it, when we began to think about think about the work, we knew that it was an important piece and it needed to be experienced, because when you walk through that beautiful spinning colorful thing, you start to realize that amongst the stars and the beautiful objects, there's also actually guns and bullets and tears. And it was very important. It became affected for us. I mean, it had a new kind of effect when you realize that the Black Lives Matter movement suddenly explodes. So there is attentiveness, and I think this is what we're really interested in, both in terms of how we process our own method, what are the orders of attention that we are bringing to our process, and also what are the orders of attention that we are able to activate in those who are participating and also like visiting the exhibition.
I think Naeem has something to add to it, and let him do. Then after that, I think I give the closing comments to Shuddha, and I think we have already taken about 1 hour and 55 minutes of this.
Yoi has said that he wants to say something after Naeem.
Yoi and Naeem, first Naeem, then Yoi, and then let's say another 5 minutes of the discussion. Okay, Naeem, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to come back to the question that Shuddha raised and kind of others raised in a chain, which started out with talking about the experience of this, but also what will happen afterwards. And there was, at one time the word return was mentioned, and I've heard this word before, return to normal, in other contexts. And there's a felt and announced anxiety about coming back to the way things were and whether we want to be. And I was thinking, obviously we had very specific experiences here, filming that's interrupted, Asako not being able to go somewhere, or people not being able to supervise their install, but that's very, very specific to this triennial, this situation. But I'm just thinking overall whether we would, whether everything from before, both about the world and about the forms of art production and showing, is something we want to go back to, right? And I'm thinking of this text that came out that some people I'm sure read called Monologue of the Virus, that came out very early, I think March 17th, from the, I think they're called the Lundi Matin Collective in French, and then was translated and circulated widely. So it came out in March at a time when nobody knew how long this was going to go on for. So it had a different reception, but there was a sentence in there, it's from the virus, and the virus says, "We are your ancestors, we are what you came from." And then somewhere down in the text, it says, we have come to put on the emergency brakes, which you yourself can't find. So an argument that capitalism run amok and a world shaped by it needs to slow down somehow. And back in March, I found a lot of people, myself included, saying, well, this is not bad, it's a good thing to have a break. And then the break continued and continued and continued until now. You're in summer, and none of the mythology of warm weather killing the virus has happened. And you're looking at this as a long-term extensive thing, but people are still talking about post-vaccine, we're going to go back to the way things were. And if I think of biennials, triennials that we all participate in, the one part that I'm not sure about going back to is the overproduction of our presences all over the world, right? I mean, artists and curators travel a lot for the necessity of their work. Sometimes it's the only way the work can even get started, with a site visit or whatever. And I've just personally wondered about the sustainability of also, it's one thing to make works from our own context, and that gets shown in Yokohama or somewhere else. But sometimes the call is also to go to those places, do the site visit, and become some sort of experts or mini experts in that local context even. And okay, sometimes there can be amazing frictions. I mean, the first thing that Raqs shared with me is the, Bengali woman with a Japanese surname who wrote a travel diary, which is translated. And so there's a Dhaka, Narayanganj, Yokohama connection. So those are the beautiful moments of the cosmopolitan exchange, quote unquote. But I also feel like there's an overproduction. And one of the things I just wanted to comment, I mean, Yokohama's going in a different way, but I did notice that once the lockdown had set in, all museums started doing this process of everything had to move online, and they were bombarding us with emails every week. And I understand that's what they have to do, or maybe it feels like bombarding because everything is now on email. But there's also a way that there seemed to be no way that we could actually make use of this opportunity to slow down. Like, we haven't slowed down. I don't mean Yokohama Triennale, I mean generally. And I'm worried, both for my own mental state and for everybody else's, that when this is kind of over, we're going to not only go back to that high speed thing we were in, but even faster to compensate for a quote unquote, we're in this sense of like, oh my God, a lost year, that's impossible. So just something to think about, because the ecosystem within which we work collectively is the exchange of the mind. And I feel like there was a high speed overproduction going on that I don't necessarily want to go back to in the same way.
Yeah, Yoi?
Yeah, I do really agree a lot with Naim in that sense, because I'm also, while I was making my work, a lot of my reflections, because the film is quite long, but it's about this dilemma between showing failure in that kind of thing, or success. What is success and failure? And then when I was thinking also about the Olympics, like the official motto of the Olympics is faster, higher, stronger, which is like how the world has been running for these few centuries, like trying to go faster and producing more, being more creative, more. And then in 2011 in Japan happened the Fukushima collapse, which in a way I think is very symbolic of how the most not effective, but most cost effective way of creating electricity turns into the most dangerous thing. So there is a ratio of effect and cost. And then, as Naim was saying, production of works also takes that shape. So in that sense, I think this kind of very energetic process could be also like lowered in peak. So in a way that we can do it more relaxed. And so I think that this way of doing things remotely can become an alternative. So not maybe main, but it's just like having different dishes to choose from and different ways of doing communication. And in that sense, I think that this pandemic is kind of a very good chance to think about what is actually what we do want to do, or what is the pace, and to be free, to get freedom from these structures of judging or of like they are very how do you say when something is measured in one only dimension? So it's like many very monodimensional way of judging things, of better, light and darkness, good and bad, like success and failure. So I think this kind of very complex and diverse ways of accepting reality and showing reality might be very, very, in that way, a new alternative. And in that sense, the Yokohama Triennial that has this year has been done in a way that has never been done, might show like new alternatives of production and presenting works. Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense.
Thank you, Yoi. Maybe a minute to Jeebesh, and then I request Shuddha to wind up. Will that be fine? Jeebesh, do you wish to share something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of this idea of overproduction or this kind of what you were Naim saying, becoming an expert. Actually, the contemporary art is a very strange side where there is overproduction of a certain kind, but there is actually a very low production. I'm knowing by the way I know artists in Delhi, there would be about 300, 400. I see actually works by only 15, 20, 30 of them in a year. And I think that is one problem with the ecology of art, because I think the top is so dramatized that we forget that there is a big, very thick ecology of people sustaining, thinking artistically and producing. So I think this movement is good because, first of all, I saw they emerge through some of them took, like Sajan in Money in Berlin, he captured this movement, did many webinars, he produced many webinars, and that reworking, I think, is why I think this movement is important. There is like we did Shanghai Biennale, we did Manifesta, we never did this movement. And nobody would have taken it very seriously if we did this movement where we called some of the artists we work with, converse, to think about this conjunction. So in that sense, I think, and second is the question of the expert. Actually, everybody knows contemporary artists are expert at nothing. And that's why you may not get kicked around. Because expert, like yesterday I was seeing a film on Jadugora in uranium mining, and I was telling my friends today, it is there is a tailing pond, and it is contaminated and leaking massively radioactivity, and the whole large number of, which is small number in compared to the population of India, but a significantly large number of young boys and girls are actually having degenerative bone disease. So obviously they are cancerous, the deep bone cancer has taken root. But the experts say that nothing to do with radiation, nothing to do with contamination, it is fine. So they have an expertise in something else, but the expertise that for which you are going to them, they are not experts in, but for sure. So in a sense that we have to discover this space of the contemporary art, who we are, not in the language that is given through professionalization of knowledge or language that is given through this expert, non-expert, those heuristic by which we think sometimes, you know, you want to call yourself the frontliner, sometimes you become a soldier, sometimes a doctor, that kind of neurotic way of trying to fix an image for oneself. So in that sense, I'm saying maybe it's a very productive time because you really know that you are not an expert. And when you are going somewhere, you are actually being called for something else altogether. So for some other reason, which may be inchoate, which maybe even the person who is invited, you don't know. But they know that there is something else this calling is, and that's the zone of indistinction between all of us, where we are very, very helpful to each other. We open up some way of seeing the world in a very interesting, specific way. And that is what I have learned from the Triennale. That is what I learned from seeing, you know, all these works that appear, that we have commissioned, appeared to us a few days before the Triennale opened. And some even not then, you know, we saw it later. And there are works that are living works in the Plot 48. Somebody asked the question, what is the Plot 48 difference between the museum? Plot 48, there are a lot of living works that are living, which museum can't have it, because the logic of a museum is to deal with the dead. It's a dead lever. The living lever has to work somewhere else, or the living animate matter has to work somewhere else. The living animate matter is working in Plot 48, and we have not seen it. There is a symphony of the algae, which is there. There is the body, there is plants going out of the chewing gum of Neil Armstrong, and there are a lot of other things happening. The walls are moving. But the idea is that this tangible, kinetic, living energy, which Plot 48 is about, is something that we have not seen it emerge. It is emerging. There are 40 artists working on site now, doing it. We don't know their name. They're just creating on a daily basis. So this energy, this is something that escapes our. You have set it up. There is an infrastructure that has been put in place. You have set it up. Protagonists are unknown and known to you. And that's the energy of contemporary art. And believe me, that is the energy that very few domains allow you. So we want to celebrate it in that sense.
Shuddha?
Monica,
I will now mute myself.
Can I pass the baton to you?
Okay, I think you are conscious of the time which we have taken, and that's fairly understandable, in fact. But nevertheless, I think it's been a fruitful discussion. I hope our viewers have kind of got some sense of what this Triennale is all about. Although we were unable to show as many visuals I would have imagined, and in fact I take this responsibility. I did try to get as many visuals as possible, but I thought maybe someone artist would show those visuals, but maybe later on we can have another kind of a discussion in which we show more of visuals and less of the discussion, so that people get to see the works as such. Maybe once the Triennale organizers have kind of photographed all of those works which are on display, then probably we can have a better sense of how the Triennale really looks and feels like. But anyways, I wish, because of the pandemic, I do not know how much time or space the museum and Plot 48 and other places can spare, unless they have another event in the pipeline. Maybe the Triennale could be extended, hopefully, some more months so that when it opens up, people could physically go and visit it. And one other thing which comes to my mind is the human mind is always creative, inventive, and it keeps discovering things. Maybe this pandemic, when people cannot move around, people cannot physically go and create and show, maybe when how, like the way the television was invented, this mobile and the cyber world was invented, the film was invented, maybe we are in for another medium which can be invented, which can help us express ourselves in that way, which can make us actually see things three-dimensionally, which can make us smell things, which can make us feel as if we are with each other, the human warmth, which is so much necessary for this. But at the same time, I think whatever is given, and within the given, whatever the Triennale organizers, the Raqs Media Collective, the artists, their supporters, your colleagues, your co-curators inside over there at the venue, and people who are involved in the construction activity, people who are recording, who are maintaining, all those people are really a must to be thanked, because without them it probably could not have happened. And we at the Punjab Lalit Kala Akademi feel proud that this kind of a discussion has happened, has taken place from this small town per se, which has been designed by the world famous 20th century architect Le Corbusier, which is an example of modernity in itself, and that we are able to host this discussion. We are very happy and very proud. At the same time, I am really thankful to all of you, the way Shuddha, Jeebesh, Monica have worked towards making this discussion possible, and all the artists with Asako or Naim or Amol, Renuka, Monica, Shuddha, Kabelo, Ivana, Masaru, and if I've forgotten somebody's name, please forgive me. And all of Lantian, all of you have really given your time, and I'm so thankful to all of you. And I hope that we are able to connect with each other one day physically, as well as have another discussion, if you all agree, maybe with a different set of artists through the course of this Triennale. Thank you very much indeed. And this is live, as we know, and it is going to be there on the YouTube channel, PLKA live stream. Anybody who wishes to see it later, they can watch it. And unfortunately, there were not many questions, but there were some comments which were on Naeem's film and some other, they were in the kind of sense of, not questions, but comments. So we have not taken them up, and quite a lot of people did kind of participate in it, did associate with us. And I thank all the viewers, thank all of you. And with your permission, now I'm going to end this meeting. We have one visual of an intestine-like, work, which was created, which to me, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I am incorrect, which sums up the, feeling. It's a gut, and this COVID probably comes from the, gut of somewhere, some lab or some animal or some human or something, which gut is so very important for all of us. So this if we can handle this, we can handle the entire world, we can handle everything else. And thank you so much, everybody. And this is what Raqs had written. So I leave you with this little note by Raqs. Thank you so much, everybody. Monica, Yoi, Jeebesh, Asako, Lantian, Kabelo, Malatsie, everybody. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Good night.